Welcome to my little studio. Painted a nice little original gray canvas, gray bottom, and I am shooting some food photography. I'm actually working on a cookbook, and this cookbook is going to be photographed unlike so many other cookbooks in color. This one is going to be done in black and white, and it's going to be done in 4x5 in black and white film. I'm shooting T-Max 400 film, and right now I'm working on some fruit. Earlier I was working on some eggs, and I am photographing the whole cookbook, not all in this little studio that I constructed. They'll be on different backgrounds, but all with my Shimano 4x5 camera and black and white film. So it should be a pretty cool cookbook. I'm trying to create some classical images, classical black and white images that you would have seen the guys made in the 1930s, 20s and 30s with their large format cameras. And that's the look and feel that I'm going to try to have with just a little bit a more modern twist. I'm kind of playing with a little bit of light, trying to get that a little bit of a Irving Penn studio type of look. But that's what I've been doing here. And one of the things that I wanted to take you through today was working with a 4x5 camera and working close up, shooting close up images with a 4x5 camera. Of course, when you start working with a 4x5 and you go beyond the range, I'm using a 150mm lens right now, so it's a 6-inch lens. When you go beyond that range, you have to start compensating for your exposure, because the farther and more bellows throw that you have, the less light actually gets into the camera and reaches the back of the film. So you have to compensate and you have to start overexposing. So I'm going to show you, and I'm going to take you through the formula. It's a very easy formula of how to photograph close-ups, but then how to make that proper compensation for your close-up images. One of the other things that I'm going to do is I have some old Polaroid Type 55 film, and I'm going to give that a shot, and we're going to see if that still works, because I have a box of it still in the fridge, and I really have to kind of use it up, because I think pretty soon it's going to be useless and not going to be able to use it at all. So I'm going to take you through the steps that I do to shoot close-up images and the formula that I use to convert my exposures and give it the proper exposure. One of the things that you're going to need is a tape measure. And a tape measure is going to show you exactly how much extra bellows that you have. Right now, on my 150mm lens, which is a 6-inch lens, I'm at approximately 9 inches. And a great way to know how to compensate for your exposure is the 50% rule. For every 50% of extra bellows, so I have 3 inches of extra bellows, that's approximately 50%. For every 50% of extra bellows, you need to give 1 stop extra exposure. So we're going to try this out and see how this works here. So my exposure is 1 second at f8. So if you use the 50% rule, I now have to go to 1 second at f5.6. But that's not going to give me very much depth of field, and I'm going to want a lot more depth of field than that. So I'm going to have to start adding time. So 2 seconds is f11, 4 seconds is f16. So let's try that, 4 seconds at f16. Plus we need to give it that 1 extra stop. So we're going to do the exposure at 4 seconds at f11 with 400 ISO film. Oh, one of the things that I forgot to mention with my T-Max 400 film, I actually did the exposure for 5 seconds because of reciprocity failure. Once you start getting into most films over 1 second or 2 seconds, you start getting reciprocity failure. And if you get reciprocity failure, you need to add time. So on my reciprocity app, it said to add 1 extra second. So my exposure was actually for 5 seconds, not the 4 seconds. And I want to try a sheet of Polaroid Type 55 on this, and let's see if we can get this to work. Now, of course, Polaroid Type 55 is 50 ISO. So from my original exposure of 4 seconds at f11, at 400, I'm gonna have to do 8 seconds at 200, 16 seconds at 100, 32 seconds at 50, and then reciprocity, we're gonna have to deal with that. And let's say we're gonna have to add another 30 seconds. So let's do the exposure for 1 minute at f11 at 50 ISO. There we go, still working. That exposure was kind of long, I think. A little too long for that. But that negative can be printed down. So 1 second at f11. 1 second, f11. See if I can get a frame off quickly before my light goes. Polaroid Type 100. So film exposure with a view camera is the same as that of any other camera, except that the Bellows extension, the distance from the center of the lens to the film, and reciprocity failure more often need the consideration. As the Bellows extension increases, the intensity of light reaches the film decreases. The formula is as follows: Bellows length squared over focal length squared equals exposure factor. Assume that the focal length is 6 inches, 150 millimeters, and that the Bellows extension is 12 inches. Therefore, 12 squared over 6 squared equals 144 over 36 equals 4 times. The exposure factor is 4 times, or 2 stops. So if the indicated exposure is 1/250th at f8, the correct exposure would be 1/60th at f8. So then the other thing that you can use if you're like me and not great at math is the reciprocity timer, because not only does the reciprocity timer tell you if you're doing long exposures how much more time you need, but it actually has a Bellows extension factor. So if you're using a focal length of 150 millimeters, you just dial in how much actual Bellows extension you're using, which I'm using 9 here right now. You hit apply and it says right there, 1 1/3 stops is how much you have to add to your exposure. So this not only is the reciprocity timer is not only great for your reciprocity failure, but also your Bellows extension if you're doing close-ups. Because I'm using an 8-inch lens, and I almost have 14 inches of Bellows extension, I'm gonna give this 2 extra stops of light from my exposure reading, which was 2 seconds at f22. So I'm gonna go 4 seconds at f16, and then give it, for reciprocity, 5 seconds. So because I am 8 inches away on a 6-inch lens, I'm only 25% away. So my exposure right now is 2 seconds at f16. I'm not going to add a full stop. I'm going to make my exposure 3 seconds at f16 to give it just a little bit more, because I'm also metering just for the side light, not right on. I want it to go a little darker. I'm kind of metering for the highlights. So I'm going to expose this at 3 seconds at f16. So you can see if you're doing close-ups in the studio or close-up portraits, close-ups out in the field, this is an important formula to know. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to leave me a comment and subscribe. See you next time. Cheers.